Imagine a new kind of investing, a potentially life-changing way to invest that honors biblical principles, the kind of principles that you and I grew up with. Since 1994, Timothy Plan has made biblically responsible investing possible, offering mutual funds and ETFs that are filtered for biblical principles. Don't compromise your values. Invest with Timothy Plan. Ask your financial advisor or call Timothy Plan at 1-800-TIM-PLAN. Again, that's 1-800-846-7526 and discover what it means to be a biblically responsible investor. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing. Mutual funds distributed by Timothy Partners Ltd. and ETFs distributed by Foreside Fund Services LLC. As a paid testimonial, there is no guarantee of future performance and each experience will differ.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Fire! Pursuing truth. Torching idols, rebelling against the world. This is the HECKPHIRE Podcast.
And it's here. We are launching now, for the first time ever, the HECKPHIRE, spelled with a PH, because those are my initials, the HECKPHIRE Podcast. And it is great, however many of you have joined us, however many of you are downloading this podcast for the first time ever. It's great to have you amongst our audience. There's going to be a few slight deviations and changes from things that have happened in the past. There is a portion of this, and you're hearing it now, that is going to be for all of you. That's going to be for all subscribers, everybody that subscribes to the podcast or is part of our Substack. All of that you can access at the main hub, the main website, peterheck.com. You can go there and you get access to all of this. This is the free stuff. There is going to be a section, a portion, that will be sent out separately, and that's going to go to our paid subscribers. So, I would love for all of you to become paid subscribers. You would be receiving a second, a different, additional element of this podcast, the HECKPHIRE Podcast. The HECKPHIRE Podcast, the bonus side of things. And I'll be excited to send that to all of you. But this is going to be the main part, and we're going to do this. It's going to be HECKPHIRE. Now listen, there's a couple things about this. I wanted to launch it here and time it with the election, and now moving forward from the election, and all of those things, and how we as Christians can read our culture around us and affect our culture around us. That's what we're interested in doing, trying to build the kingdom of Christ, the kingdom of God on earth, responding to cultural things, of course, but doing so through a biblical lens, in a biblical way, in a way that honors God. That's ultimately what I want this to be all about. And so the topics are going to be across the board. They're going to be different. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to launch this after the election, so it wasn't all election stuff all the time. And we're going to get into that as we start the podcast here in just a moment. But I got to cover a couple logistical things. Thing number one, we will have a better intro to all of this. We do have a logo that'll be behind me for those of you watching, and that's another part of this. You can, because of our sponsors at Creative Financial Design, you can watch this podcast if you're interested in doing that. Again, all of that accessible there at the website, peterheck.com. But you can watch it on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. That's probably the easiest way to go about getting it, is to sign up and be a subscriber there. But it's also, if you're signed up for our Substack, this podcast is delivered to your inbox the moment that it comes out. And so you can download it there, or it'll automatically download through Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all of those other places that you get your podcasts. But I'm just saying, if you're wanting to watch it, we're sending that out via our Substack. That's also where you go to become a paid subscriber. This sounds a lot more confusing than what it really is. The vast majority of you are just transferring over from the old memo pod. And so largely it's not really going to be that different. It may look a little bit different, and they may come in a couple separate emails different, but for the most part, it's the same. So that's that. Now, we will have a better intro to all of this and the music bed and all of that stuff. But I wanted to launch this, and I wanted to do it now. So that's why we're doing this, even though it's not like, when you do a grand opening, you want the store to be ready. You don't want some of the shelves to be empty. Some of our shelves are empty, but you're just going to have to get used to that. That's who I am. Shelves are half empty kind of guy. That's me. So the election is now over. Let's jump into this because there's so much that could be discussed and so much that could be talked about. And again, I am fully aware that there are people in the political world who are much smarter than I am. And they're much more insightful than I am. So why would one listen to this podcast? Because I'm hopeful that I'm not the only voice that's doing this. In fact, I know I'm not the only voice that's doing this. But I'm hopeful that I'm someone in your sphere that will be approaching these kinds of topics from a Christian lens, doing my best to see this through the eyes of faith. In other words, not a blind pursuit of power, not idolatry, where we're worshiping one political party or political agenda or political movement over another, but in fact, we're trying to honor God in all of our decisions, whether that's economic, whether that's our family life, whether that's in our marriages, whether that's in the raising of our children, whether that's in our relationship to education and training up the next generation, whether that's in politics or in art or in sports or whatever it might be. We have a responsibility, if our lives have been turned over to Christ, that they're turned over to Him in every area. And it should be reflected that way. It's one of the things that I wanted to be clear in us believers. And I sent this out in the memo at the beginning of the week. And paid subscribers get that memo at the beginning of the week. My prayer for this election was essentially, when Wednesday comes, let the world see God's people at peace because of who has ultimate authority and ultimate power. And it's nobody in D.C., it's nobody anywhere else. So how can we be different? There was an article, and I'm going to share with you portions of this article, because, and it's not just you all that I'm sharing this with, my students at school, government students at school, who followed this election a little more closely than probably most, they are reading this. It was that good. It's a piece by John Gabriel. We asked the question, John Gabriel, I believe, is a Christian himself, but we can take what he's saying and certainly understand why this is the way a Christian will respond. He is basically saying, you went and you voted, now go forget about politics. Now, I'm not completely on board with the idea that you're going to forget about politics, because politics are everywhere. I mean, it's part of every part of our life in some way. But he's talking about national, federal, political agenda, elections, and identifying yourself accordingly. Listen to some of what he says here. The fact that this political obsession, in fact, he references it as the personal things in your life are actually political. That philosophy, that all personal things are also political. Personal is political. That mantra, it has infected virtually every part of society. And it's torn apart our social fabric, and you can see the results of it. And he lists some examples. A job recruiter gets fired for sharing a political meme. Okay, wait a minute. His political beliefs are his personal beliefs. He's doing that on his own time. In no way does that affect his role as a job recruiter. It does now. Because your personal views are also political views which are public. A coffee shop is review bombed on Yelp for issuing a pro-Hamas statement, or it's boycotted because it has stores in Israel. An actor loses work because he requested an exemption from a vaccine mandate. That's what it is. When we declare the private as political, this boundary that exists between the two is completely eroded, and now our coworkers and our teammates and our longtime friends and even our family members become intractable enemies. I'm telling you, Christians, that is not how we live. That is not how we are to live. Where, well, I disagree with this person on some serious political issues, therefore they are now my enemy. They are now someone I can't be friends with. They are now somebody I can't date. They're now somebody that I don't want my children associating with. That's not the way we live. Not the way we are to live. On an individual level, people now waste hours, he writes, contemplating the ethical repercussions of wearing certain nail polish, what type of vehicle they buy, what hiking attire they wear. Every mundane thing is now potentially a political act, and it's enough to drive a society mad. And I think that's where a lot of people are. I think it's why there's such exhaustion over these topics. And you saw it as well as I did. If you don't know this is coming, 2028, if you haven't been told, is going to be the most important election of your lifetime. The fate of this civilization is going to rest on what happens in 2028. In fact, if the Republican doesn't win in 2028, chances are we will never have another election in this country. And, if you didn't know, if the Democrat doesn't win in 2028, chances are we won't ever have another election in our lifetimes, because it's going to become a dictatorship. All the things that have been said about the 2024 election will be said about the 2028 election when it rolls around. And you can spend the next 4 years obsessing over that and working yourself into a frenzy and freaking out about it. Man, I see this at school. Kids who are so engaged now. And I remember when I first started teaching, I came in and was doing student teaching in a high school during the 2000 election. It was the fall semester. So I was there. I did the first half of the semester, the first 9 weeks in a middle school. And at the end of that, the election of 2000 between Bush and Gore was red hot. It was coming to bear. And I switched over and I was in a high school. And the election happened. And you remember what happened with Florida, and nobody knew who the president was going to be. Okay, I remember those kids were clueless about what was going on. And one of the reasons that I looked so good as a student teacher, which landed me a job at that school, one of the reasons I looked so good is because I was well versed in the political world. I was eating it up. I was loving it. And so I would go in, and our government classes, we'd be talking about it. And the kids would go home, and they'd be informed. And parents then were pleased that those things were being explained at school. Like I said, I looked like some kind of genius. Okay, that was then. Kids didn't know. Cell phones were brand new, and they weren't even really used for anything besides just calling. I mean, texting was not even really a big thing at all. They were largely unaware. They had lives. Well, now, today, just 20 some years later, those kids at school today know everything because it's on Snapchat, it's on TikTok, it's on Snapchat, on X, it's on Facebook. They can't get away from it. Constant updates and all of this. And there's podcasts, and there's YouTube videos, and there's reels, and all of these things that are pumping the political into their world. And the personal becomes the political to them as well. And they can't be friends with certain people, or they don't want to be friends with certain people, or they are friends with people, and then that kid comes to school wearing a MAGA shirt. Well, I can't be friends with them anymore. I didn't know this is who you are. It's not healthy. Gabriel goes on and writes, some of the over-politicized are idealists. They're captured by a charismatic leader. John F. Kennedy made Democrats swoon. Barack Obama did that 50 years later. Others devote themselves to some programmatic ideology. He says, I once met a libertarian, these are people that don't want government doing anything, who got angry every time he rolled his trash bin out because he felt like the city shouldn't be collecting garbage. Meanwhile, many people have allowed their political views to form ever-narrowing identities. What does that mean? This is so true. You take a guy who starts out as a Republican, but then he doesn't want to identify as a Republican anymore because some of those Republicans are rhinos. They're like Mitt Romney, and they're like Paul Ryan. And they're like George W. Bush. I don't want to associate with those people. And so, he doesn't. He's no longer considering himself a Republican. Now he's MAGA. Make America Great. But he also knows that some of those MAGA people raise their hands and sing how great thou art, and it's weird, and he's not one of the God people. No, he's America first. He's an America first MAGA guy. But he also believes in supporting Israel, so it's not America only. He's not an isolationist. Do you see how this works? Ever narrowing identities. And if somebody doesn't line up with all of those things, okay, take Paul Ryan. A lot of the people that voted for Donald Trump thought Paul Ryan was the greatest thing in politics. When Mitt Romney picked him to be the running mate, people couldn't wait to see, Republicans couldn't wait to see Paul Ryan debate Joe Biden. Because Paul Ryan was going to eat him for lunch, and Paul Ryan was young, and he was conservative, and he was great. But a couple policy disagreements. And Donald Trump saying something bad about Paul Ryan not endorsing Donald Trump. Well, now, I cannot in any way, shape, or form be affiliated with the Paul Ryan type. Are you a Paul Ryan type of Republican? Oh, I know your type. Personal becomes the political. Political becomes the personal. Despite their devotion to the cause, no politician, he writes, economic theory, or policy platform will ever create happiness. I want to say that again. Despite their devotion to the cause, no politician and no economic theory, no policy platform will ever create happiness. It's true. What it'll lead to is polarization, and that's where we are as a republic. When politics is your identity, it's hard to distinguish between a policy disagreement and a personal attack. I want to say that again, because this is something Christians better know. When your politics becomes your identity, it is very difficult to distinguish between a policy disagreement and a personal attack. On policy, I believe that states should decide the issue of abortion. Somebody makes that statement. But somebody else is an abortion abolitionist. They say no state should have the right to allow an abortion. What are you okay with baby murder? You see what's happening there? Policy disagreement has now become a personal attack on the character of the individual. Reasoned debate is replaced with emotion. And the most common emotion, especially in the social media era, is rage. A mother disowns a daughter because they vote for a different candidate. There was a video that circulated in this election cycle. I didn't see it. I saw people write about it, where a woman is talking about how she lost her dad. And then as she goes on, you realize the dad didn't die. She willingly cut her dad out of her life because he was a Trump guy. And that's not the man that raised her. That's not the man that cared for her. That man wouldn't support somebody like that. She doesn't know who this guy. I didn't leave my dad left me. It's insanity. Absolute insanity. A dear friend will block his former best man for believing COVID-19 came from a lab. A small business's employees will quit their jobs en masse because the owner happens to support Israel. It's nuts. Your boss is a good boss. You laugh, you get along. He gives you a raise or a bonus every Christmas, but he supports Israel, so I'm out. I'm done. This personal is political thing, it's the antithesis of loving your neighbor. And a Christian can't ignore that. You know what it requires? This is how Gabriel writes it: a strict separation of self and state. We always talk about the separation between church and state. How about the separation between self and state? I want you to listen to these next few words, because this is money. Government doesn't exist to give your life meaning, to create a sense of self-worth, or to grant you some prepackaged identity. It is there Government is there to perform mundane tasks, only a few of which are essential to your day-to-day life. The government negotiates treaties, it defends our shores, it enforces our laws, it prints money, and currently a lot of it. And, Gabriel writes this, whatever the government does, it's guaranteed to be slow, inefficient, and tick off at least half of the population. In other words, it's not something that should infect every cell of society. At best, the government can provide a background order that allows citizens to flourish in their private lives, leaving them so fulfilled that they only think about politics a week out from Election Day. Have you noticed we are basically starting the presidential campaign of 2028? I'm exaggerating, but we are starting the congressional midterms. The fundraising has already begun for the very candidates who were just elected. They've already started fundraising for their reelection. Opponents are already starting to discuss who's going to line up. Who are we going to field against this person right there? And that has occurred in more recent days. The time between election season is getting shorter and shorter and shorter because election campaigns are growing longer and longer and longer. And why is that happening? Because politics is infecting every area of our lives. Therefore, we think about it all the time. The most beneficial attitude towards politics is a passionate devotion to keeping it out of our lives. At least 9/10 of our day should be focused on what? Family, friends, faith, work, hobbies, everything else that actually brings joy and beauty into your life. That's where you should be focused. I think we all know that. There was a Pew study that was done. The question was simply, what makes your life meaningful? Do you know what the top 5 answers were? Family, job, wealth, friends, and health. Now, I think it's bad news and something we Christians need to work on that faith does not factor in there. That should be number 1 easily. Jesus should be number 1 easily for what makes life meaningful. But again, this wasn't just a poll of Christians, this was everybody. So there is work for us to do that Christ doesn't land in the top 5. But I'll tell you what else doesn't land in the top 5. Politics. Politics isn't there. Nobody believes that politics makes their life meaningful. So let me encourage you, brothers and sisters, so that you can encourage everybody else in your sphere. You and I have now had our say in the political sphere. Some of us are exceedingly happy, some of us are grieved, and some of us are kind of indifferent. Set it all aside. Your effectiveness for the kingdom of God, I believe, hinges on us now being able to set it to the side, be happier and healthier, and a far better companion, Gabriel writes at the Thanksgiving table. And all of this will leave us better equipped to encourage political change before the next election by doing what? By engaging in relationships, by investing in people's lives. You want a positive change in society. That's how you bring it about. That's an important message. I wanted to share that with you. A couple things before we wrap it up here on the on this portion of HECKPHIRE, because I want to do a deep dive in some of this stuff. But let me show you in just living color. Those of you who are going to listen to the podcast, you're only going to hear the audio, and I'm going to have to bleep some of it. But those of you who are watching on YouTube, you'll see this. These are some of the reactions. And again, I know this is anecdotal. These are some of the reactions from younger generations, millennials or Gen Z, to the outcome of the presidential election that occurred on Tuesday. I'm going to make my case for you that the personal has become political, the political has become personal. The two have interacted and intermingled way too much. And if you want proof of it, look at this or listen to this.
How did we get here? How did we get here?
All I can say is how dare you?
If you voted for that man, if you voted for anybody other than Kamala and you live in one of the states that it was, close, or if you didn't vote,
Senate race. It's not gonna happen. Go Kamala.
I chose family. I chose women. I chose America. I love you.
I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done with you. I'm done with you and your mother and your sister. I'm just done with all of this.
If this guy does end up winning again, all of the people who voted for him will be happy and they'll just be celebrating. And everyone else, everyone who feels threatened by him is scared. We're scared for our lives. We're scared for our friends.
Okay, and this is where I'm gonna be different than a lot of conservative commentators and political commentators out there that are gonna watch that and they're gonna hold up a mug that says liberal tears on it and tell you that liberal tears are delicious and all of this stuff. And I get that there's an element of teasing and joking there, but people don't find that funny. People find that taunting. People find that rude, and it embitters people, and it fuels the fire. And I don't think scripturally that's who we as Christ followers are supposed to be. Pretty sure Jesus says, "Blessed are the peacemakers; they'll be called the children of God." Peacemakers, and mocking liberal tears when you see or you hear things like that, that isn't being a peacemaker. That right there, what you just saw, is crazy stuff. And I don't mean the people are crazy. The politics has made them crazy. What you see right there is the fruit of false gods. It's the fruit of idolatry. It's the fruit of people having exalted temporary earthly political power to a position that it should never try to hold. It is the centerpiece of those individuals' existence, to the point where they are reduced to mourning. That's what that is. That is suffering and mourning, internal distress over the outcome of an election that, honestly, if we're being completely straightforward, is not going to impact their day-to-day life one iota. It simply won't. And I'll tell you, I remember being on the radio back in 2008 when Barack Obama got elected. And there were a lot of us that thought, well, this is it. We can't survive this. And then in 2012, we said the same thing. We can't survive another 4 years of Barack Obama. Well, we did. We survived both of them. And in 2016, these same people that are now weeping, their older siblings, were doing the same thing when Donald Trump got it. You've seen the people falling to the ground and screaming no. That's what this is. And they're still here. We're still here. And a lot of people say, man, we can't have a dementia patient for 4 years as our president. We'll never survive it. And we're here. And we're going to be here, provided the Lord doesn't judge us and condemn us. We're going to be here at the end of this 4 years. There's no rational reason for people to act like the way that you just saw. It is the result of power becoming everything. And when you lose it, you've lost your God. And therefore you've lost your peace. So the mission then for Christians is self-evident. Reaching those people, freeing them from the obvious chains that are strapped to them, that are holding them. And those are heavy chains. That's not made up, what you just saw or heard. That's not made up. That's where some are, and they need freedom from that. And so Christians being in prayer for those people would be huge. And when you pray for those people, they become real to you. They're no longer your enemy. It's hard to hate someone that you are praying for legitimately. And then the ones that we know of, the ones that we have contact with, even those that kind of hold us off at a distance, we can reach out to them, form relationship with them, ask them to go have coffee. And if they say no, they say no. But we can be persistent. Relationship, understanding, and helping them to understand that the personal doesn't have to be political and the political doesn't need to be personal. And the truth is that we are all better off when it's not. And the work that we're trying to do for the gospel is better off as well. All right, that's enough HECKPHIRE for today. So we're going to wrap it up here. Now, if you are a paid subscriber, there's more to this. There's a second part to this. And one of the things that we're unleashing with the HECKPHIRE podcast is the Friday Five. Since I send this out on Friday, I'm going to take questions that have come in from you, 5 of them, 5 things that you've brought up either through the comment section below or through direct emails, and that's the way historically it's been through direct emails. I'm going to answer in pretty much rapid fire. I mean, I may drag it out a little bit, but it'll be pretty much rapid fire. The Friday Five, to give you my best take on questions that you are particularly interested in. Now, this week, they're all related to the election, because obviously the election was a big deal. Even though one of them, they're all related to the election. One of them I thought was, but they're all related. Typically, they're going to be bouncing all over the place, and that's fine. I've gone back and looked at some of the emails, and if I were to have been doing this before, they would have been all over the place, different topics, and that's great. That's the way we're going to do this. So that way, I'm responding to some of that stuff. There's more interaction there. Since I don't always get a chance to dive into the comments and respond to folks, this will be a good way to do it. So the Friday Five comes up in the second portion of this, where we try to respond to things that you specifically are interested in. I also want to tell you what I think, if I was advising the Democrat Party after getting wiped out in this election, what I think is the best suggestion that I've read, seen, or myself could come up with. We'll do that for the paid subscribers in the bonus section of the HECKPHIRE podcast. For the rest of you, I would love it if you join our paid subscriber group. We'd love to have you part of that. But if you're not, this is where I have to leave you. All right? But we will be back next Friday with more HECKPHIRE and hopefully the logos and the signs and all of that stuff that goes with it. But thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. The HECKPHIRE only burns because of loyal friends and supporters of this ministry. All of these are people and groups that I know personally and trust implicitly. I can't say enough good things about my friend Jonathan at Hartman Family Farms, about my bank, First Farmers Bank and Trust, my lawn care team at Trueland Equipment, my insurance company at Norris Insurance, the place where I buy and lease all of my vehicles, McGonigal GM Buick, and main attraction hair, nobody else touches this head, Steven's Machine, my mechanic at Terrell's Auto Service, my longtime realtor, the Wyman Group, and certainly so much can be said for those fighting for family values in the public square, like the Indiana Family Institute and Indiana Right to Life. Please support them all and thank them.